Hello, this is Bill Serban, Director of the Center for Advancing Teaching and Learning at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. This video is about how tests can be used to enhance student learning. Tests are the primary way we evaluate students. In standard instruction, a test comes at the end point of teaching and learning. We teach something, students try to learn it, and then we test them to determine what they know. However, testing can be a powerful way to enhance student learning. For nearly 100 years, researchers have known that when people try to recall what they learned previously, it improves their learning. This is known as the test effect, or test-enhanced learning. This effect is well illustrated in a study by Jeffrey Karpicki and Janelle Blunt, reported in the February 2000 journal Science. They demonstrated that college students who read material, in this case science material, and then took a test over it, outperformed students who used other study methods. In the learning phase of the experiment, students were assigned to one of 4 study methods. One group studied the material in a single study period. A second group studied the material 4 times in 4 consecutive study periods. A third group did concept mapping, in which they first studied the material and then created a concept map of it. A fourth group did retrieval practice. That is, they studied the material and then tried to recall as much of the material as they could remember. In this case, they studied the material again and once again tried to recall as much as they could. However, they received no feedback on their performance. 1 week after the learning phase of the experiment, students in all 4 groups took a short answer test that included verbatim recall and inference questions. Graphs A and B show the proportion of correct answers for each study method. As you can see, students who used retrieval practice did far better than students who used the other study methods. Why does retrieval practice work? Think of learning as involving 2 parts. First, as students encounter new information, they try to use what they already know to make sense of it and retain it. This is called encoding. Second, learning also involves being able to recall what was previously encoded. This is recall or retrieval. Students devote most of their study effort to encoding, trying to make sense of the material and retain it. This is important for comprehending the material and getting it into memory. Testing, on the other hand, focuses on a different set of processes related to retrieval of what one has learned. Researchers believe that as students try to recall what they learned, they reconstruct their knowledge, strengthening their ability to recall it again in the future. More research will shed light on the intricacies of the test effect. Eventually, we will better understand when and why testing can boost student learning. But there are important classroom applications that we can use now. Here are a few suggestions. Use retrieval practice as a learning strategy in your class. Think of where you can use tests in your class as a tool to help students learn the material and not simply to evaluate what they learned. A short written response in the middle or at the end of a class period may help students consolidate the class concepts. Or practice tests could be used in the class to help students prepare for a later graded test. Keep in mind that if you use practice tests, that it is important for students to actually take the test, not simply to study the test items. The test effect works on strengthening retrieval processes, and that won't happen unless students try to recall the material. You can also encourage students to test themselves. Students could do more self-testing when they study. This may be a hard sell. Research indicates that students don't believe that testing is an effective way to learn. In the Karpicki and Blunt experiments, students thought that retrieval practice would be the least effective of the 4 study methods. Moreover, self-testing can be tedious. Trying to remember what you learned is more difficult than simply rereading the material again. You can suggest ways that students can break up their reading assignments into smaller segments. Propose that they read a segment, then put the material aside and try to remember as much as they can. Not only will the act of retrieval practice improve their learning, but they will be able to identify gaps in their understanding. They can then restudy the material more strategically, concentrating on what they don't yet know very well. If you would like more information about test-enhanced learning, go to the Student Learning blog at this address.